Grand Rising. No, let me stop. Good evening. Good evening. Hold on. I gotta turn my lights on. Hold on. I don't like sneezing. If you know, you know. How's everybody doing this evening? I'm down in Florida, man. Hoping that this hurricane is gracious to all of us. I know a lot of people been evacuating, so hopefully everybody made it out in time. If you are in that zone where you need to evacuate, scary times, man. Scary times. Give it a sec. Let a few people join. This was spur of the moment, kind of. I wasn't sure. I knew I was going to jump on today. Wasn't sure what time, but we got a couple good things to discuss. I don't know if y'all saw the description. We're going to get a little bit into. We got Tim Walz, but we got cool conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates. Well, you may or may not think it's a cool conversation. He was getting interviewed. What else do we have? We have, I just said Tim Walz, and then just one other video. We're just going to focus on some of the FEMA relief, a couple videos about Mayorkas and then Corinne Jean-Pierre. I believe yes. I got to make sure I remember her name. I don't know why my big bro Doug, he's having trouble getting in. I was trying to help him get in. Have a couple more of these. I didn't eat dinner. We recorded our book club before this, so let me just get 2 more pretzels. Shout out to Whole Foods, actually. Coming through with this amazing snack, dark chocolate pretzels. Tap in. But honestly, I'm in Miami. We do ShopRite. We're ShopRite. From in Jersey, it's all ShopRite. ShopRite and Sarah supermarkets at that. ShopRite. Make sure you shop at ShopRite. And if you're in Jersey, ShopRite and the Sarah supermarkets. They may have a couple in New York. I gotta check on that. Big bro Doug is in the building. You're the only one I was waiting for, big bro. You were the only one I was waiting for. So let's turn the music down. Let's get right to it. So we're going to review. We have 3 topics today that we're reviewing. 3 topics. Not sure how long they're going to take, but we're going to get through them. So we have 3 topics. Let's start off with this Ta-Nehisi Coates. This Ta-Nehisi Coates, if you're not familiar with him, amazing writer, amazing journalist, and he's written a few amazing books. I think I've read 2 of them, but he has a new book coming that just came out. I believe it's called The Message, and a part of it is discussing the issues going on between Israel and Palestine. So he did an interview with Nate Burleson. I believe it's CBS, Nate Burleson. I believe it's Gail King, and then another gentleman that I wasn't familiar with. And shout out to my guy, Nate Burleson. So when y'all see the video, I guess it'll make sense if I pull the video up. So let me do that now, actually. So this gentleman that y'all are seeing right here, my guy Nate Burleson, former NFL wide receiver. So you may see him on a lot of different platforms. Now, Nate and I, what's funny is we went to the same broadcast boot camp. So the NFL does a broadcast boot camp where they help you. It actually was a cool camp. I probably went to it a little bit early in order to appreciate it and take advantage of the opportunity as much as some other people did, like my guy Nate. Nate was more of a veteran, played a bunch of years, had an amazing career, and you could tell that he was going there with a purpose. He went there with a purpose, and it all made sense for him. And he's had a very successful career discussing sports, and now he's kind of moving into a new direction, I would say. I don't know if it's political. I don't know what this space is, like this kind of space where Gayle King interviewing different people, almost like that Strahan type of role. So shout out to my guy, Nate. So we're just going to go through this interview. We're going to go through this interview. Like I said, a lot of people had an issue with it. CBS, they're going to show, I'll show you a video. Well, we may not even get to that particular video, but CBS even came out and said that this interview, they had a problem with how their anchor or journalist conducted the interview. So they said it did not live up to their standards. So we're just going to go through it, get y'all thoughts. Y'all know I'm going to share mine, and we'll go from there. Let's start it off.
Best-selling author Ta-Nehisi Coates. His new book, The Message, is a trio of interconnected essays that examine how the stories we tell or avoid telling can shape and even distort our reality. In the book, Coates reflects on his emotional first trip to Africa to visit Dakar, Senegal. Then he takes readers to Columbia, South Carolina, where he reports on the attempted banning of one of his books on race. And finally, Coates travels to the Middle East to witness the Israeli-Palestinian conflict firsthand. Ta-Nehisi Coates, good morning. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. Good morning, guys.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. You say that this book is written specifically for writers, stating that the task for young writers should be nothing less than changing the world. Why do you feel like writers should bear that responsibility?
Saving the world. Saving the world. Just to be really specific. Writing is how we interpret so much of everything that is around us. The Message is a political book. It argues that much of our politics actually happens before we walk into a voting booth, that our choices around us, that who we believe is human, who we don't believe is human, what policies we believe should be in the world, which policies we don't, are actually shaped largely by writing and the stories we tell. And so I believe that writers, and particularly young writers, have so much to do in the politics and in this time when, you know, obviously we have so much conflict and there's so many quote unquote issues to be dealt with.
Ta-Nehisi, I want to dive into the Israel-Palestine section of the book. It's the largest section.
So this gentleman, I forget his name. What is his name? You could tell he was pretty aggressive and had some things that he wanted to get across. I just looked up his name. It starts with a D. What is his name? Doesn't matter. We'll get his name. But if you just, this is what a lot of people had an issue with: his energy, his tone, his, I guess what some people would call accusatory language. I would say that, or some people said it was disrespectful. I'm going to let you guys choose what you guys think about it. But you can't ignore, you know, he's barely even finished his sentence, and this gentleman couldn't wait to chime in.
Quote issues to be dealt with.
Ta-Nehisi, I want to dive into the Israel-Palestine section of the book. It's the largest section of the book. And I have to say, when I read the book, I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist. And so then I found myself wondering.
A lot of people had an issue with that. So he's pretty much saying if you take away all the awards, everything else that Ta-Nehisi represents, that this book would pretty much be the type of book that would be in a quote unquote extremist backpack. I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit later on, may even circle back to the conversation, but I want to just let it flow a little bit so you guys get a, you know, better feel for the conversation.
Why does Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I've known for a long time, read his work for a long time, very talented, smart guy, leave out so much? Why leave out that Israel is surrounded by countries that want to eliminate it? Why leave out that Israel deals with terror groups that want to eliminate it? Why not detail anything of the first and the second intifada, the cafe bombings, the bus bombings, the little kids blown to bits? And is it because you just don't believe that Israel in any condition has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that
Extremely loaded question. A lot to respond to. I learned a lot from this interview. Mainly how Ta-Nehisi responds to these questions. That's what I said. I learned a lot. I picked up a lot.
Condition has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. That's the first thing I would say. I am most concerned always with those who don't have a voice, with those who don't have the ability to talk.
I don't know if he could have answered that question any better. Now, I'm not saying, I'm not saying a side thing. I'm saying I'm just being direct with y'all. When I hear him, he wrote the book, and clearly it's spoken from a Palestinian voice. So with that being the case, and the guy, what's his name? Tony. So I'm gonna butcher his last name, but I just looked it up. Hold on. What got me going through this Google thing? 1 second. All right. Clearly, so Ta-Nehisi responded in a way where he said that there's no shortage. When you look at the media, when it comes to America, obviously Israel is an ally of ours. Now, when you hear most things on TV and people say it's to the point where we all know, and I got to be direct. The only way I know how to be real with y'all is to be direct. Other than that, I'm going to start stuttering, sounding like I'm not being myself. We know that there are a lot more Jewish influences that are going to be supportive of Israel when it comes to the media compared to Palestine. It just is what it is. To the point where everybody that gets in front of a camera, we all become extremely well aware and maybe think about what we're getting ready to say when it comes to this issue. And it's not because, if we're just being honest, because of any backlash that we'll receive from a Palestinian side, or when we talk about like, oh man, this may compromise me in certain ways. I know whether it's a job, whether it's anything, that's an American ally. We can't beat around the bush when it comes to that. Israel is an American ally, and the majority of the media outlets are more pro-Israel and Israel friendly than Palestine. He's a journalist. He decided to write a story from a particular group's point of view that is not told as much as from an Israeli standpoint. It is what it is. You can't disagree with that. You cannot disagree with that. Now, I know when it comes to even maybe the biggest example of this is you'll have, and I think Kamala is going through this right now. Maybe Tim Walz is going through it, where a lot of the Democratic Party, they're splitting on this particular issue when it comes to Israel and Palestine. Because a lot of the Democratic supporters, especially some of the younger people, I know Michigan, there's a large Muslim population, but a lot of people in the country do not like. Some people are on Israel's side, some people are on Palestine's side. Most of the people on Palestine's side are more aligned with the Democratic Party. And you see Kamala as well as Biden straddling the fence a lot, not really sure what they want to do, not sure what they want to say. We saw what happened with Jamal Bowman, and I always forget Corey Joseph, I believe is her name, where they lost two of their elections. And a large reason that they lost it is because you had a group that is obviously close with the American Israel AIPAC, where they funded a lot of the competitors that Jamal Bowman and Corey were going against in their primaries. They can support whoever they want to support, right? Okay. So it just goes, I'm just trying to set the scene and give context around this particular discussion, because I think it's required when it comes to these conversations overall, and just us being realistic and being willing to just call it as it is. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't know. You guys can comment in the chat if you want to. Other than that, I'm just going to keep going with the interview. But I was just very impressed with how he answered it, just being very direct, not beating around the bush, and saying, I wrote, there's no shortage of that perspective, so I wrote this perspective.
I've asked repeatedly in my interviews, I am most concerned, I would say the perspective.
Any condition has a right to exist?
Well, I would say the perspective that you just outlined, there is no shortage of that perspective in American media. That's the first thing I would say. I am most concerned always with those who don't have a voice, with those who don't have the ability to talk. I have asked repeatedly in my interviews whether there is a single network, mainstream organization in America with a Palestinian American bureau chief or correspondent who actually has a voice to articulate their part of the world. I've been a reporter for 20 years. The reporters of those who believe more sympathetically about Israel and its right to exist don't have a problem getting their voice out. But what I saw in Palestine, what I saw on the West Bank, what I saw in Haifa in Israel, what I saw in the South Hebron Hills, those were the stories that I have not heard. And those were the stories that I was most occupied with. I wrote a 260-page book. It is not a treatise on the entirety of the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But if you were to read this book, you would be left wondering, why does any of Israel exist? What a horrific place, committing horrific acts on a daily basis. So I think the question is central and key. If Israel has a right to exist, and if your answer is no, then I guess the question becomes, why do the Palestinians have a right to exist? Why do 20 different Muslim?
It's an extremely loaded question. And another reason why I'm impressed with how Ta-Nehisi conducted himself. An extremely loaded question. This gentleman, and I'll be honest, as I'm rewatching it, CBS, I would believe, probably had more of an issue and was probably more upset with him because he decided to dominate the conversation. Now, when we talk about context, now I told you I would get the gentleman's name, Tony DeKoupil, Dokoupil. I would say it's because he dominated the conversation almost to where Nate and I believe that's Gail weren't even existing in the conversation. Now he has did a little research on him. Well, not a little research, but he has his ex-wife lives in the Middle East. I believe lives in, I'm not sure exactly where, but lives in the Middle East, and he has a couple kids that live there as well. So clearly he has some skin in the game. Nothing wrong with that. He has some skin in the game and he's deciding to voice it. But as I'm rewatching it, I'm thinking more, they probably had more of an issue to where he just decided to take over the complete conversation rather than the issue with him asking these questions. I'm actually happy that he asked these questions. I'm actually happy that he asked these questions because, in my opinion, I thought it gave Ta-Nehisi the opportunity to discuss these things, and it created a bigger platform maybe than he even wanted to. Maybe it backfired in a way from him. I don't know. But it brought the discussion around these things, and Ta-Nehisi was able to have a bigger voice speaking on the things that he wanted to speak about and answer questions directly, just as he was being asked those questions.
Countries.
My answer is that no country in this world establishes.
Let me go back a sec.
If Israel has a right to exist, and if your answer is no, then I guess the question becomes, why does
I want to go back just because it was a loaded question.
But if a treatise on the entirety of the conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
But if you were to read this book, you would be left wondering, why does any of Israel exist? What a horrific place, committing horrific acts on a daily basis. So
if I read it, which I'm going to read it, and I would think that, then shouldn't he also be concerned with the fact of what Ta-Nehisi said before this, where there's no shortage of one particular viewpoint? Here in America, we usually hear, especially on mainstream news outlets, more of a pro-Israel standpoint. We hear what's going on with the conflict more through the voice of Israel. So for him to now ask Ta-Nehisi, well, you wrote a book through the voice of the Palestinians, that's a problem, because now when people read this book, they're gonna have a takeaway that Israel shouldn't exist. That brings up a lot of red flags for me. That brings up a lot of questions where it's like, well, Are you saying that the things that he's saying in the book are not true? Or are you saying that he's only talking about maybe some of the atrocities on one side? But if you have a problem with him only talking about the atrocities on one side, then you should also use your voice perhaps to talk about the atrocities only be discussed on one side when it's a pro-Israel standpoint. Because the last time I checked at the Democratic Convention, they allowed pro-Israel people to speak, but they did not allow pro-Palestinian people to be able to speak. The last time I saw Netanyahu speak in front of Congress, I believe, he got a standing ovation from everybody and a whole lot of support to the point where he even acknowledged that he was surprised of the ovation that he got. So I'm just calling it straight. If it's a problem for one, then have that same energy when it's also in your favor as you do when it's not in your favor, when it's told from the other side standpoint.
I think the question is central and key. If Israel has a right to exist, and if your answer is no, then I guess the question becomes, why do the Palestinians have a right to exist? Why do 20 different Muslim countries have a right to exist?
My answer is that no country in this world establishes its ability to exist through rights. Countries establish their ability to exist through force, as America did. And so I think this question of right to Israel does exist. It's a fact. The question of its right is not a question that I would be faced with any other country.
But you write a book that delegitimizes the pillars of Israel. It seems like an effort to topple the whole building of it. So I come back to the question, and it's what I struggle with.
I have to keep stopping him. I have to keep stopping him. Now, once again, I don't mind him asking these questions. I don't mind him asking these questions. Ta-Nehisi's prepared. To be totally honest, it shows perhaps maybe some of the issues that we're facing when we only get one side, typically. He's complaining, the very same complaints that he's having. If Ta-Nehisi never wrote his book, would he be the person that's saying like, hey, we're only getting one side, it's only pro-Israel, we got to do a better job of hearing both sides? I don't think that would be his energy. So all I'm saying is just keep the same energy regardless of whose interest that it's in. Because when he's being very aggressive, I'm cool with that. Ta-Nehisi's a big boy, he can handle himself. I have no problem with that. To me, this makes him look like more of an elitist than it makes Ta-Nehisi look like it. To me, he's validating a lot of the things that he's justifying the reason why Ta-Nehisi had to write the book. You get what I'm saying? So all the things that you're saying, hey, if Israel doesn't have a right to exist, then why do Palestinians have the right to exist or have a state? Okay, well, if Israel has a state, then are you now saying that the Palestinian people deserve to have it? So we need to have more of these conversations. We need to have more of these conversations. Less censorship. Let's have the convo. Let everybody hear the convo.
Throughout this book,
The other country.
but you write a book that delegitimizes the pillars of Israel. It seems like an effort to topple the whole building of it.
You write a book that delegitimizes the pillars of Israel. I'm pretty sure that Ta-Nehisi decided to write his book because there was a lot of delegitimizing of the pillars of, let's say, the Palestinian people and the things that they believe in their culture. And this is always one of those conversations where, because it's almost like the things that make you uncomfortable, you got to lean into. You got to lean into. And if we really want peace, because y'all know, well, maybe y'all don't know, peace, that's all I'm for. I'm not for this group killing this group killing that. It's peace. That's all I'm pushing. I'm pushing peace, period. Because that is the only answer to all of this. You can't have, if one side does something to the other side, then it's always going to be a retaliation. Nobody knows where it started. And even if we do know where it started, it doesn't matter, because the person is always going to be trying to get the last lick. It's just like kids in the sandbox. You hit me, I got to get the last hit. It's just going to be that. And where I'm coming in, and this is why I think it's important to have an outside standpoint in some cases, or at least us to voice, opinion, especially when we're involved. That's an ally of ours. We give a lot of support. That comes out of our tax money. Okay. I feel that I deserve to have a voice, and I feel like it's necessary for a lot of people who are not directly involved to voice their opinion and to be a voice of reason, because if not, then we know what happens when two people are just fighting. Nobody's just going to say, you know what, we're good here. Let's just shake hands and walk away. It usually is just going to be some group that is destroyed and the other group wins. And then what happens when that group's destroyed? Those kids and those grandkids, it creates a certain animosity towards the other group to now where they want to get their get back. And then it just keeps going back and forth. So once again, I'm pushing peace. And in order to push peace, we need to be able to hear both people's perspectives, both sides' perspectives, no matter what's in the best interest of us personally, whether that's financially or anything else. If we really feel that our purpose is to reach a peaceful resolution.
So I come back to the question, and it's what I struggled with throughout this book. What is it that so particularly offends you about the existence of a Jewish state that is a Jewish safe place and not any of the other states out there?
There's nothing that offends me about a Jewish state. I am offended by the idea of states built on ethnocracy, no matter where they are.
Muslim included.
I would not want a state where any group of people laid down their citizenship rights based on ethnicity. The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship.
So let me define that for you, ethnocracy, because I wasn't familiar with that term. I had to look it up. I'll read it to you guys. An ethnocracy is a type of political structure in which the state apparatus is controlled by a dominant ethnic group or groups to further its interest. So I believe Ta-Nehisi is going to go and explain that.
The country of Israel is a state in which half the population exists on one tier of citizenship, and everybody else that's ruled by Israelis exists on another tier, including Palestinian Israeli citizens. The only people that exist on that first tier are Israeli Jews. Why do we support that? Why is that okay? I'm the child of Jim Crow. I'm the child of people that were born into a country where that was exactly the case of American apartheid. I walk over there and I walk through the occupied territories and I walk down the street in Hebron. And a guy says to me, I can't walk down the street unless I profess my religion. I'm with another path. No. I want to. This is very, very important.
It is important. It is
extremely important.
Yeah, let me lay it down.
I'm working with the person that is guiding me is a Palestinian whose father, whose grandfather and grandmother was born in this town. And I have more freedom to walk than he does. He can't ride on certain roads. He can't get water in the same way that Israeli citizens who live less than a mile away from him can.
And why
is that okay?
Why is that? Why is there no agency in this book for the Palestinians? They exist in your narrative merely as victims of the Israelis, as though they were not offered peace at any juncture.
That's dangerous. I'll be honest, that's dangerous. And I understand. Listen, he's saying, why is that? Basically saying that there's no accountability for the reason why that is, alluding to Palestinians created a lot of this situation or the entire situation. I don't know what he's thinking in his mind. From Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I think this is what a lot of people don't realize. Even when I have conversations with a lot of my Jewish friends, I think that they don't realize, just like many of us, it's like we don't realize or pay attention to something, or it doesn't hit us as hard unless it's impacting us directly. So our brother could be going through something, our cousin could be going through something, somebody in the country could be going through something, but it doesn't impact us unless it hits close to home. It just is what it is. Like that's just how a lot of us function. Even though we hear all these sayings like a threat to democracy is a threat to anywhere is a threat to democracy. We hear all these sayings and stuff, but truth be told, if somebody gets mistreated for something, there's a whole bunch of other people that may not know that person or not impacted by it or not going to say anything. But then when that person gets mistreated, they want everybody to support their efforts. It's just how it works. So when I hear him speak and when I hear him say, well, you know, that's pretty much alluding, like I said, that, well, why is that? Justifying it. in some ways, or at least saying, hey, we need to look into the reasons behind that. And he's directing us to look at what the Palestinians have done. I think back to what my ancestors went through. And I'm not talking about, a lot of times we use the word ancestors. I'm talking about my grandparents, my great-grandparents, not very long ago. It was justified why we couldn't have certain things that another group could have just because the color of our skin. But let's not act as if they didn't rationalize those things. They rationalized why Black people could be slaves in America. They rationalized Jim Crow laws. The government rationalized a lot of these things. So just because there's a rationalization, a rationale, a rationale around something, does not mean that we do not have to look at it from a standpoint and just say, yo, I don't care how you rationalize this. It's wrong. So you could say like, okay, this was caused by this side as well as this side. It's wrong. So how do we fix it? You heard what I just said as far as the definition of ethnocracy. It doesn't seem right. Who would feel right about? Isn't that the whole point of why Israelis and people that feel that there should be a Jewish state? Isn't that the whole reason behind it? Because there's a claim that, hey, my family has ties to this particular area. So how can you then not feel or have some type of empathy or sympathy when he's talking about when the situation's reversed, and here you have a Palestinian who can't go certain places in a land that he lived, his parents lived, his grandparents lived. He doesn't have the same rights that an American has coming over there. Now, we're never going to get to a agreement as far as who is more to blame for the situation. That's not the conversation that I want to have. I don't think it's a productive conversation playing the blame game. However, there has to be some sort of resolution. That's the standpoint that I'm coming from. How do we find a resolution? Okay, let's have, how do we have an Israeli state where people are treated maybe better? And I don't know the ins and outs of how the treatment, how people are treated. I don't believe Ta-Nehisi had an understanding until he went over there and did research as well, talked to people. I don't have that understanding. But clearly there's an issue there. So how do we figure out a solution to say, okay, you can live, we can have this state, this Israeli state in peace, this Palestinian state in peace. That would, I would assume that would be the goal, having this two-state solution that I hear a lot about. So the issue is more so, how do we move forward to get there rather than playing the blame game and using things that happened in the past to justify certain things that are not okay happening now?
As though they don't have a stake in this as well. What is their role in the lack of a Palestinian?
I have a very, 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 very moral compass about this. And again, perhaps it's because of my ancestry. Either apartheid is right or it's wrong. It's really, really simple. Either what I saw was right or it's wrong. I am, for instance, against the death penalty. What the person did to get the death penalty, it really doesn't matter to me. I don't care if they were selling a nickel bag of marijuana or if they were a serial killer. I am against the death penalty. I am against a state that discriminates against people on the basis of ethnicity. I'm against that. There is nothing the Palestinians could do that would make that okay for me. My book is not based on the hyper-morality
What's the last
of the
message
Palestinian
you want
people.
In lessons, because many people feel it's complicated. You say it's not complicated. Less than 20 seconds. What's your message?
Less than 20 seconds. I want people to read the book.
Well,
And I don't make the assumption that somebody would just read the book and have read nothing else about Israel
Okay.
and Palestine.
You're still invited to High Holidays. I'll see you at the show.
Hold on, I gotta text my mother back. My mom just got in. Let me just text her real quick. Hold on. All right, so I don't like, I really don't like a 6-minute conversation on these things. I really dislike it because, I mean, this gentleman clearly, he's more invested. He wants to get his point across. He wants to ask certain questions. I'm not mad at the questions. I wish that this was an hour, 2-hour long conversation, because these are the conversations that need to be had. Now, a lot of people were mad at this gentleman. They were mad at him. And I guess the type of questions that he asked, and I understand why. I understand why. However, I think it's necessary. Say exactly how you feel. I don't think that he spoke in a disrespectful tone from, you know, how he's asking the questions, how he's pressuring them. I don't think it was that. I think that it was from an elitist tone where it's almost as if you're totally disregarding the fact you're asking me certain questions about why my particular book that I decided to write, that I decided to do research on and tell a particular story. You're getting upset with that, and you can't understand that aspect because you're saying that it makes people look at Jewish people or an Israeli state in a negative way. But what do we see all the time in America with all the mainstream news? You can't have an issue with Ta-Nehisi writing one book where he's talking about it for 40 pages, but then not have an issue with all the things that we're seeing in America on mainstream platforms, where they're only, or mostly the majority, are more pro-Israel. That's when we have the back and forth. That's when I love this convo. I love this convo. Two people sit down, have a conversation. Let's discuss. Like I said, I wish I had more time to discuss more of the details, unpack all these things. Unpack all these things, have a conversation, and then let's figure out a way to move forward in a more morally sound way. Because I believe that's the goal. I understand that, you know, there's Israelis want to live in peace. I agree that of course there's going to be extreme people on both sides. But I believe that the majority of people want to live in peace on both sides. I really do believe that. Now, I also believe that there's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of hatred. There's a lot of things that have brewed up that has caused a lot of hatred that I can't even appreciate, to be totally honest. That I can't even appreciate. But one thing that I would ask is, and before I go back to what the gentleman first started off, I wanted to go back to that. So I will circle back to that. But if there's so much tension between these particular groups, Palestinians and Israelis, is there that same level of appreciation for what Black people have gone through in this country? Because one of the craziest things to me is, and I'll be totally honest, this really irks me. When I hear people claiming a particular land because of something from however many years ago, but then you're living on land right now that was taken from the indigenous people that were here. So it's almost like, how can you feel so passionate about a claim to certain land based on things that happened a long time ago? And I have these conversations and I'm sitting here and I'm just like, or I'm observing these conversations and I'm sitting here like, damn, like as a Black person, it almost makes me feel like a sucker. I'll be totally honest. And let me be very clear, as a Black person who's Native American, who has a significant Native American percentage, probably like more than the percentage of Kamala claiming Black. Yeah. Native American more than probably Kamala claiming Black. Well, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that plays out. But seriously, how can I feel good about myself when I live on a land I can't even afford a damn house? I'm renting right now, right? So here I am renting. I don't have a house. I don't own any land. But I get to see, I'm watching something that I'm just calling it straight up as it is. We support Israel. I pay taxes here. So that means my tax dollars go to supporting Israel. And it's going to, whether they print the money or whether they take it out of our taxes, it's impacting me as an American citizen. And here I'm sitting in America. This is why I said I feel like a sucker, because I'm supporting another group and getting land that they feel is deserved, and to them, based on their heritage living there, they feel that they have that claim. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here, my people were here. Whether you want to look at Black or Native Americans, because I don't believe that whole transatlantic slave trade, knock it off. Knock it off. There's no way that this many black people are here in America and everybody came over on a slave ship. I've never seen a slave ship. You could show me dinosaur bones, but I've never seen a slave ship. Knock it off. We were here. There were black people here, and that's why a lot of the Moors and a lot of the black people were the ones that were showing people the routes to get here, because black people have been coming here for a very long time. All you have to do is look in the diaries of all these explorers. Look in the diary of all these explorers, and Columbus describes what natives looked like when he came to the Americas. They didn't look like Pocahontas, how Pocahontas is described in these movies. No, they look like black people. So once again, I have to go back to the point where it's like I'm sitting here feeling like a sucker, because here I'm supporting another group getting something that they feel they're entitled to in land, while a lot of people are living here who support those groups getting their land, whichever side you're on. And here I am. I don't have a claim to anything based on the land that was stolen from my people. And there's a lot of people who are living right in America right now who have an opinion about what's going on over there and feel strongly about their group having a claim to a land from, it could be thousands of years ago. But my people had this land hundreds of years ago. And the people that are still living here, supporting other groups, supporting their group getting land over there, you're living on land that was stolen from my people. So how else could I feel? Like it's not adding up. It's not making sense to me. And to be totally honest, it really makes me feel very cowardly. It makes me feel extremely cowardly. Now, I wanted to go back to the beginning, this first question that was asked.
To the Middle East to wit
I wanted to go back.
The political policies we don't tell.
When he mentioned extreme.
The Israel-Palestine section of the book. It's the largest section of the book. And I have to say, when I read the book, I imagine if I took your name out of it, took away the awards and the acclaim, took the cover off the book, the publishing house goes away, the content of that section would not be out of place in the backpack of an extremist.
What exactly is an extremist? What exactly is an extremist? Because to me, Christopher Columbus was an extremist. To me, Andrew Jackson was an extremist. To me, a lot of the people that we celebrate in America were extremists. We only celebrate them because their extreme actions were at the benefit of the people that are in power and who established America, rather than the people that maybe look like me who did not benefit. So what is it? Is Malcolm X an extremist? People thought, I know everybody likes to think that Martin Luther King Jr., everybody loved him. No, he was known as an extremist at the time. Marcus Garvey was an extremist, right? That's why they got him out of here. Nelson Mandela was known as an extremist. One person's extremist is another person's hero, and we're being very naive if we don't look at it that way. What's an extreme? Let me ask you a question. If you're getting beat up, and somebody has weapons and you know, guns, maybe knives, and they're coming after you and your people, do you not have to respond with extreme measures, or can you respond with just like, hey, you know, I just don't want to fight it? The more extreme situation that you're in, you have to respond in an extreme way, right? Now I'm talking about me right now. So when I hear the word extremist, that doesn't mean good or bad to me. That just means somebody that is looking to bring about change. Now, it can be significantly good. It could be destructively bad. But I guess that depends on which side of the fence we're on, right? If we're being real. Because most people, when it is an extreme situation, are not going to look at it objectively. We're going to look at it from a standpoint of what's in the best interest of us, what benefits us the most, right? And that is why I'm perfectly fine with him having these with this conversation, this interview. We need more of these interviews. We need more of these interviews. Maybe we need more of these interviews to encourage more people to tell their story from their perspective. Because I'll tell you what, me hearing this conversation, I'm over here like I have an issue. I have an issue. And I know that I've said it before on this platform, and I've kind of gotten away from having these conversations on this particular topic, but I got an issue. I got an issue. You know, I just don't feel that, I just don't feel good. I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't feel good when people can have conversations with me, or people can have conversations where I'm seeing this gentleman having a conversation with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who's a black man in America. And you can have people that clearly you see very clearly when it's benefiting your people and when it's benefiting, okay, yeah, we need this land. Like, that's what we're entitled to. Okay, well, bro, where do you live? You live in New York? You live here? Yeah, well, that land was taken over the last, not even a 1,000 years ago. That land was stolen from people. That land was stolen from a group of people, and in a very malicious way. As Ta-Nehisi Coates mentioned, there's no right to a state. There's no right. Things are taken. Things are taken, usually with force, usually with a lot of destruction, raping, pillaging, all these different things that occur during war. That's how things are taken. Look at the Civil War. That's how claims to, so it just, it does leave me in a little bit of a very, I don't want to say down mindset. I don't want to say angry mindset, but it's a mixed bag of emotions. It's a mixed bag of emotions. And I'll be totally honest, when I see, this may come as a surprise, but when I see two groups of people fighting for land that they both feel entitled to, there's a certain level of appreciation that I have when I see that. Because I'm looking at these two groups risk their lives to fight for land that they feel that they're entitled to because their ancestors walked on that land. That's what both groups say. And I'm over here just trying to figure it out, renting 2 apartments with no claim to any land. We don't even pass down the stories to remind the next generations, hey, we own this land. We were here. We don't even know our story. And it makes me sick to my stomach in a lot of ways. So I appreciate in certain ways. I can't stand the violence. I'm gonna be told I don't like the violence, but I appreciate people being willing to sacrifice so much for their heritage while I'm sitting here as a black man in America and we won't sacrifice anything. We don't even, it's like, we allow the Democrats to dangle that carrot, that bait in front of our face maybe every 4 years talking about reparations. They actually haven't even been speaking about it this election. But we allow them to dangle that in front of our eyes. And then once they get elected or once they don't get elected, then it disappears for years. But until they next time need our support. But why are we not pushing for that? Would I be extreme if I started to push for that? Would I be extreme? Like, what would classify me as being extreme if I know that land was taken from my ancestors? If I know that land was taken from my ancestors and I want it back, at what point does it become extreme when I start to take certain measures to get it back? Is it extreme when I ask and I say, hey, can I have my land back? Is it extreme when I demand my land back? Is it extreme when I put an or else? Is it extreme when certain acts, like, I'm just wondering what classifies something as extreme? Because I would imagine that from the perspective of the person that has the land, then anything that removes their ownership of the land, they would see as extreme. But I would just be seeing as righteous, right? So perspectives are needed. conversations are needed. Have the conversation. Have the conversation. Let's hear an Israeli perspective. Let's hear a Jewish American perspective. Let's hear a Palestinian perspective. Let's hear the perspectives. But we can't look at it. I mean, we could do, I guess the country could do whatever we want. But I'm never going to look at it just from a one-sided standpoint, just because I don't just, maybe this is not good. I'm not just picking sides. Just pick a side because it's in my best interest, whatever that means. I wasn't raised like that. When I have kids, I'm not raising them like that. There's certain principles that we got to stand on, right? If you explain this to a 5-year-old, they would understand. That's how you know principles. You know who has some of the strongest moral compasses? Ask kids maybe between the ages of like 4 and 8. That's not fair. That's not right. You said this. Now you're saying that. Explain it to a 4-year-old to 8-year-old. They took my toy. I wasn't allowed to take their toy. So why can't they take my toy? I want my toy back. Yes, you deserve to have your toy. See, little kids, they don't allow all the other factors, all the other influences to factor into their moral compass in deciding what's right and wrong and what should be done. A little kid will say, okay, well, we need to split this and make this. So you have half and then we have half. And then that, when we get older, we start to compromise our morals and principles based on what's in our best interest in other areas, at least what we perceive as our best interest. So I'll leave the conversation here. Once again, I want to be very clear. I guess I can understand why CBS called him out on certain things. I believe CBS said that it doesn't live up to their editorial standards or journalist standards, interview standards. I'm not sure. They said something like that. I'm perfectly fine with this. I wanted more. Ask direct conversations. They're not yelling at each other. They're not like having a conversation where somebody needs to get in the middle and separate them. Our only issue is the only reason why Gail jumped into the conversation. I guess they had to go to commercial break. She's telling Ta-Nehisi to wrap it up in 20 seconds. No, we need to bring this back on and have these conversations, because if we don't have these conversations, then we're never going to figure out what each other's perspectives are. And there has to be a certain level of give and take. There has to be. Everything requires compromise, right? You know, and I guess in my instance as a Black American, shit, I'm looking at it like we just compromised everything. So I'm looking at other groups that are not willing to compromise unless it's, I'm not willing to compromise more than the other group willing to compromise. Maybe that's why we are in the position we're in, because we just compromise everything. We don't stand on morals. We don't stand on principles. We don't stand on integrity. We don't stand on pride to our ancestors. So that's how I feel about that. So let's move on to the next convo. We'll go to a conversation about Tim Walz. I wanted him to, he had a response. He went on Fox. Shout out to that brother. Shout out to Tim Walz going on Fox. He went on Fox and voiced his opinion. He was asked some questions regarding the debate. Some were actually on Israel and Palestine. We don't need to watch that one, but I do want to watch him answering questions on abortion. This is obviously a huge issue. I actually hate that it's a huge issue. I wish that two groups would be able to come together, compromise. You know, you compromise on this side, and you work to something that makes sense for everybody. But like I said, we're dealing with adults here, so it doesn't particularly work like that. Adults have pride, there's power, there's all these. Ask some little four-year-old to 8-year-olds to figure it out. Matter of fact, have some 4-year-old to 8-year-olds figure it out. Maybe people on both sides will be looking at this thing a little bit differently. All right, so let's take a look at this, and we'll go through it and comment as we go.
focus on what your position is and the vice president's position as well. I want to talk about abortion, too, because this came up at the debate. It's been a winning argument for Democrats on many ballots, but I want to clarify what the law is there in Minnesota. Abortion Finder, a website that helps women find access, says abortion is legal throughout pregnancy in Minnesota. There is no ban or limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along in a pregnancy you are. You signed the bill that makes it legal through all 9 months. Is that a position you think Democrats should advocate for nationally?
Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that
This
law
is a
goes
woman's
far
right
beyond Roe v. Wade.
to make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That was been debunked on every occasion. But
wait,
look, this is a.
But let's agree.
Being
What you signed is there's not a single limit through 9 months of pregnancy. Roe had a trimester framework that did have limits through the pregnancy. The Minnesota law does not have that.
This puts the decision with the woman and her health care providers. The situation we have.
He's not answering the question. And I actually did not know that about Roe v. Wade. If you're not familiar with going through Roe v. Wade, there was a trimester. It was different. The rules for the first trimester different than the second trimester, different than the third trimester. If he really believes this is why I say just stand on what you stand on. Walz, you signed it. If what she's saying is true, just answer her question. You haven't even, and if it's not true, then say no. If there's no limit through 9 months. If there's no term limit, then just say that and say exactly why and say, hey, we're standing on it. We're putting the decision on women. But he's trying to say the second part without acknowledging the first part and just trying to hide behind, oh, yeah, well, we just wanted to get Roe v. Wade back. But that's not what you signed into law. You could have taken the exact principles from Roe v. Wade and implemented them in your state. That's not what you did. You did something different. So why are you not standing on that? That's what raises red flags for me. That's when I start thinking like, damn, you're not even willing to stand on what you stand on. Stand on it. You stand on what you stand on so we can have a real conversation and figure out the best way to move forward. He won't even answer that. I'll go back and let you guys, you tell me if you got an answer.
It's very clear. It does not. Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that
this
law
is a
goes
woman's
far
right
beyond Roe v. Wade.
to make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That was been debunked on every occasion. But
wait,
look, this is.
What has been debunked? He just said that's been debunked. If you really listen to some of these conversations, like that's why I have to keep going back. He just said that has been debunked. What are you saying has been debunked? Let's go back. And matter of fact, I should have showed you this graphic. I'm not sure if you guys saw it.
On abortion in Minnesota based on how
abortion is legal throughout pregnancy in Minnesota. There is no ban or limit on abortion in Minnesota based on how far along in the pregnancy you are. If that's what you believe in, stand on it. Tell us why. But if that's not, then it's like you're showing us that you have an issue with it by not being able to just stand on it. And it happens on both sides. J.D. Vance, if you believe, now, of course, you're the vice president. So if you believe in a federal ban, and if that's what you stand on, and that's what you said before, then stand on it and say that. Now, if you say, hey, I looked at things, my personal outlook on certain things may differ from President Trump on this particular thing, but I support him putting it in the state's decision to where he took it out of the federal, took it from a federal level, got rid of Roe v. Wade and said, hey, your states decide. Now, if that's what you support, then say that you support it. But all this indirect conversation, all this politically correct, all this scared, walking on eggshells, trying to manipulate people with all the word salads, all it does is make somebody like me, I don't know about y'all, but it makes somebody like me just say like, nah, they lying.
How far along in a pregnancy you are. You signed the bill that makes it legal through all 9 months. Is that a position you think Democrats should advocate for nationally?
Look, the vice president and I have been clear. The restoration of Roe versus Wade is what we're asking for.
But that
this is
law
a
goes
woman's
far
right
beyond Roe v. Wade.
to make her own choice. The law is very clear. It does not change that. That was been debunked on every occasion. But
wait,
look, this is a.
He's saying that it's been debunked on multiple occasions. They just put up the law. I'm telling you, just go Google Roe v. Wade right now. It's a trimester, it's broken down by trimesters. What you just saw in Minnesota law, why don't you just say it's been debunked? What's been debunked? Are you saying that what she just put up on the screen is wrong? So then say that.
Disagree. What you signed is there's not a single limit through 9 months of pregnancy. Roe had a trimester framework that did have limits through the pregnancy. The Minnesota law does not have that.
This puts the decision with the woman and her healthcare providers. The situation we have is when you don't have the ability of healthcare providers to provide that, that's where you end up with a situation like Amanda Zaworski in Texas, where they are afraid to do what's necessary. This doesn't change anything.
Extremism. Using exceptions to prove rules. You're using the exceptions of certain instances where women have been even killed because they got to go to a different state to get certain treatment. But what you never address is that the majority of women, because when you just say there's no, like, we all know how this goes. A lot of us grew up looking at abortions like, yo, it's just, hey, I wasn't being responsible. You could always have an abortion. Let's be real. That's why a lot of people look at abortions differently when they're in their teens and 20s compared to when they get older. You got kids making decisions about terminating a pregnancy at ages where they can't even buy a drink. They're not even responsible enough to have a glass of alcohol. But they're responsible enough to make a decision about their pregnancy? So you can sit here and feel courageous and feel like you're fighting the good fight by saying, hey, we just leave it all up to the women. But in all actuality, you can't feel that there shouldn't be a framework, or you can't be that naive to think that even though you're bringing up extreme examples of, like the Hadley, I believe if I'm messing up her last name, then my apologies. But the young lady Hadley, I'll just say Hadley, who was 12 years old, got raped by her stepfather, I believe. I may be wrong. But then she had an abortion. That's an extreme situation. Most people, that's not the reason why they're having abortions. Most people are having abortions because they just don't feel like having a kid. For financial reasons, or just because, I don't trust the father. Well, you trusted him to have sex with you, and don't tell me the condom broke. Like, that's not a real, like, stop it. So I just, this is just very disingenuous. I'd rather have somebody who talks to me straight, who I may see the world totally different from, rather than people who just give me word salad and just, you don't know where they stand. They're so slippery, you don't know where they stand.
It puts the decision back on to the woman, to the physicians, and we know that this is simply something to be brought up to be very clear. Donald Trump's asking for a nationwide abortion ban.
Wait, he
and
has
again,
said that
we don't see this
he
as
has
a
said
winning
repeatedly
campaign.
that he will not sign an.
You're lying, bro. You're lying, bro. You know what's so funny? They believe Trump when it's convenient for them to believe Trump. It's like Trump said he was going to be a dictator on day one. Okay. Trump also said that he did not want a federal abortion ban. Trump also said that he's not in support. He's not aligned with Project 2025. That's not it. But y'all continue to say it. So you believe that you want us to believe when Trump says he's going to be a dictator on day one. You want us to believe that Trump is going to create a purge when he's talking about having harsh policing for an hour. You want us to believe all these things that, oh, he said it. But then don't believe the other things that he said. But you're going to let us know which things that we should believe that he's saying compared to the things that we shouldn't believe, right? We can trust you to be that filter for us, right? Never mind the fact that you're running against him, but we can still trust you, right? Okay.
A national abortion ban. Are you calling that just, it's a flat out lie?
Yes, of course. And Senator Vance has in the past said so too. Now, look, they may see this as an election issue. We see it as a right of women to make their own bodily decisions. And that's what the states like my state have the ability to put that in. States like Georgia force women to cross the border, and then we have a death of Amber Thurman.
It's not. I don't understand why people say their own bodily decisions. Like, I just really don't understand how you can. How is it your own decision? When the women that I talk to that have had abortions, the reason why they say it's such an emotional outside of just the physical can be tough as well, but it's such an emotionally difficult thing because it's not just you. You're terminating, do I be sensitive about how I'm saying it, or I just say you're terminating your baby? You're terminating a baby. It just is what it is. And maybe if we had more honest conversations about it, then people like myself growing up wouldn't look at it as casually. And if it happens to our significant other, our girlfriends, whoever, maybe we would have more of an appreciation and understanding for what they're actually going through, rather than us just thinking like, nah, you have an abortion, like you good. I don't hear them saying that, hey, abortions are things that are going to impact women in a very serious way. We don't know the mental health. We don't know the physical health that it's going to impact them. It could limit their chances of having pregnancies in the future. So if we were just realistic about that, and you had somebody like Tim Walz or Kamala Harris saying like, hey, we understand that we want to have the ability to have abortions for all these examples that you always hear us talking about. However, people need to take some responsibility and accountability for themselves and not just be having these willy-nilly abortions just because as a reason because they don't like the way condoms feel. I guarantee you that more people, if people were keeping it real, I heard that more about friends that I had growing up or different people that I heard growing up having kids. It was more, I don't like the way condom. Why didn't you use a condom? I didn't like the way they feel. Well, I bet you would be a lot more responsible if there was a more direct, clear talk on what exactly an abortion was. And instead of referring to it as reproductive rights, you're talking about the right to terminate a baby. Obviously, depending on which stage you believe is a baby, fetus, all those things. But how can something have a heartbeat and you say that it's a woman's body decision? It's only the woman's body impacted. How can there be another being with a heartbeat in a woman's body and we just sit here and say, oh, it's just a woman's body? That's not, you're lying. We're lying to ourselves. We're lying to ourselves. And the reason why I'm annoyed is because a lot of these lies to ourselves, I told them myself when I was younger, and I know a lot of other people did as well. Now you got us telling, in maybe some cases, women that weren't even like really equipped to have these conversations, and us now pressuring women to have abortions because we don't want to have kids. And of course, the women can do it sometimes too. It's just, we're just not being honest. And it goes back to the thing that I said earlier. This is why I hate that this is such a big issue. How can we just not have a more balanced conversation on this? Just a more balanced conversation. Everything is so extreme with it. A more balanced conversation. Federal ban, that's extreme. No terms, that's extreme. Can we figure out something? Can we figure out a way to meet in the middle? To preserve as much life, to provide support to people so they don't feel like abortion is just such an easy option to choose because you never know how that's going to impact people. Can we have some type of just agreement with just people being open to not being so extreme and treating it like, no, I'm rooting for the Giants. No, I'm rooting for the Cowboys. These are actually people's lives that we're playing with. We can't just look at it with fanaticism and just be fanatical in one direction. That's the extremism.
So let's be very clear. Trying to cut hairs on an issue on this is not where the American public's at. They want the restoration of Roe versus Wade. Vice President Harris said she would sign it. That's what we'll do when we're elected.
But to be clear, the Minnesota law is far beyond Roe v. Wade. And about the Amber Thurman case in Georgia, her family has, and it's tragic, she is a young mother who left behind a young son. But what her family has said is it was a complication from an abortion pill that she received, and she didn't get proper care when she went to a Georgia hospital, which had multiple opportunities to intervene there. Her own attorney, the family's attorney, says it wasn't the Georgia law, it was the hospitals, what he claims is malpractice, not treating her when she clearly showed up in distress and still had the byproducts of her pregnancy because of that rare complication from the abortion pill. So just to be clear on the Georgia law and how her family and her attorney sees it.
Now, before, I promise you, I don't think, I'm gonna be totally honest with y'all. I don't think I've heard his response. I may have listened to it while I was on the plane, falling asleep. I don't think I heard how his response. I can assume how he's gonna respond to Tim Walz. Y'all know I'm not a fan of Kamala. I don't really know much about Tim Walz. Not a fan of Kamala. Not a fan of the Democratic Party. However, what she just presented, that may be true. But I also think that there is another argument to where if you do have such harsh laws for people, for certain doctors, like I work in the healthcare industry. Doctors, as much as they take that Hippocratic oath, it's BS for the majority of them. Doctors are doctors to make money. And if you're that's my rule. There's always exceptions. I'm telling you, based on the doctors that I've met with, interacted with, been in the surgery room with, seen them look at that rotator cuff. Yeah, that's not a torn rotator cuff. Yo, there's nothing wrong with that knee. They don't have a torn meniscus. They don't have a torn ACL. Y'all just opened up the knee, went in there, cut just so you can call it a surgery. So therefore you can write it out as a code and get reimbursed a certain amount from the insurance companies. Let's be real. That happens more often than not. And if a doctor's telling you that it doesn't happen more often than not, then I would be a little bit skeptical of that particular doctor. We know how this works. It's like any other industry. If I sell sandwiches, I may not be telling you that, yo, these cold cuts are unhealthy. They're going to cause a lot of health issues down the road. You're probably going to die earlier if you eat them consistently. I'm not saying that. I'm just trying to sell you a sandwich so I can put food on my table. That's what happens. But we hold these doctors on such a plateau and has such high regards that we just lose our common sense. So I understand what a lot of Democrats do say when it comes to, and I understand this based on the conversation that I've had with certain women, where it's like, okay, if you have a state that is so harsh and has punishments on conducting abortions, then a doctor would be less likely and may be hesitant to provide certain care where it may save the mother from certain things. And if that care, like the doctors are a little hesitant because they're worried about, hey, I don't want to get in trouble having an abortion. If it goes to the board and they don't deem it as medically necessary, then I can lose my license. Doctors are very much like that, just like any other human beings would be worried about their livelihood. And you could sit here and say, well, you know, I'm a doctor. I have a job to do. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. You're either a fool or you think we're a fool. If we don't think that we're going to that you factor in to your decision what may end up happening with your license, knock it off. Knock it off. So let's keep going.
I think they also indicated that had she not go to North Carolina after the debate the other night, that she would have been in a better position. So look,
I think she also indicated, I actually did hear that. My apologies. I did hear his response. Now that he just said it, I remember recalling, and I remember like being half asleep listening to this and just saying like, what do you mean you don't think? Did she say it or not? Like what was said? You don't think you're taking such a stance on such a serious issue, but now you're talking about you don't think or you think?
Because of that rare complication from the abortion pill. So just to be clear on the Georgia law and how her family and her attorney sees it.
I think they also indicated that had she not go to North Carolina after the debate the other night, that she would have been in a better position. So look, these are the situations you're going to get into when you take this decision and put it in the hands of politicians like Donald Trump rather than women and their doctors. We trust women, we trust doctors, and we know the outcomes of that are...
Foolish statement. We trust women. We trust women. And this is why I really hope ladies take a more serious stance about this. You're talking about you trust women. A lot of these women, a 34-year-old women, you think if they look back and ran into their 17-year-old selves, 20-year-old selves, 30-year-old selves, that they would trust them and the decisions that they make? But you as a grown man, gray hair, and somebody who sets policy, you're going to tell me that we trust women? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, maybe you didn't go to high school. Maybe I don't know where you grew up. A lot of women are just having abortions and having a number of them for reasons that have nothing to do with the things that he's mentioning. But these are the things that he's actually building his foundation with. You're building your foundation off of extreme examples and trying to convince us that that's a good enough reason to have extreme policies. And both sides do it, but I'm addressing Tim Walz right now.
Better.
Okay, let's clarify more changes that you signed in Minnesota as well. Several things were repealed with respect to reporting infants who may have survived an abortion attempt. Language that used to be part of the statute was taken out. We'll put this on the screen so people can see. It used to require medical personnel to, quote, preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. That language has been repealed. It's no longer part of the law. Also struck from the law was language about reporting infants that are born alive, what treatment they receive, and whether they live or die. Why was it important to you to get that protection out of the law?
Minnesota law aligns with every other case of what physicians are required by their ethical responsibilities. And so it changed nothing other than aligning with all care that physicians provide in any circumstance for any medical case. And so it's alignment.
All right, we're going to move on.
As it's always been.
We're going to move on. 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 We can't listen to that entire video. So all right, what we want to move on to is Mayorkas. Secretary Mayorkas, correct? All right, so the hurricane. A lot of places in North Carolina, Tennessee, Florida impacted by this. A lot of them. And there's been a lot of talk about whether or not FEMA ran out of money, whether I'm hearing things about them saying that FEMA doesn't have any more money, but then I'm also hearing that FEMA, they took some of the FEMA funding and used it for migrants, different issues and it's all, there's a lot of nuances there, and people are playing a lot of word salad games in order to make whatever decision they're on or whatever side they're on to look more righteous or look like they did the right thing. And let's take a look at some of it. And we can determine for ourselves what we think is the best approach, who's lying to us, who's not, and how we feel about it. And maybe it'll impact who we end up voting for. Who knows? So let's take a look at this.
FEMA funding right after the devastation. Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas sounding the alarm on FEMA funding right after the devastation of Hurricane Helene. Listen.
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
This all comes as
unless this is one of those videos that people are going to claim is fake AI, or I don't know. I think we all have a clear understanding of what he just said. We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. That hurricane, I believe, is hitting tomorrow. I'm currently in Florida. It's supposed to hit Florida. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season. Let's keep going.
But does not have the funds to make it through the season.
This all comes as the Biden-Harris administration spent over $1 billion from a FEMA program on services for migrants. Attorney General, the great state.
So this is what I believe that people are having a lot of arguments over. So a lot of the Democrats that I hear are saying that, no, that was not for these particular crises. And this is my understanding of it. The Biden-Harris admin spent certain money from FEMA. Now, it may not have been designated to this exact particular cause, but it was taken from FEMA. And FEMA, let's be clear who FEMA is. What's the, hold on. So FEMA is the Federal Emergency Management, what is it, association? Hold on. Agency, Federal Emergency Management Association. So it was taken from FEMA. So you got some people on one side saying like, hey, it was taken from, they took the money and that's why they ran out. That's what the Republicans are saying. The Democrats are saying like, oh, they're not really acknowledging the fact that they did take the money, but they're saying that that money there was no money that was supposed to go to this particular effort that we took. So I don't know the particulars, but when I hear that there was money from FEMA being spent, because let's just use common sense. Okay, it didn't come exactly from this pot of money, but it's still under that FEMA umbrella. So if you didn't take it directly from this pot that was designated for hurricane relief, but you still took it from the umbrella of FEMA, then let's say that you did not take the money from FEMA, then I would assume that when Mayorkas says that they do not have more money, they need more money to make it through the season, that you would be able to tap into that other pot of money in order to use for this, rather than to ask Congress or wherever else you're going to get the aid from. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. That's how I'm seeing it. I may be seeing it wrong, but that's my understanding so far.
Program on services for migrants. Attorney General of the great state of Florida, Ashley Moody, joins me now. AG Moody, why does the Biden-Harris administration always seem to help American taxpayers last?
Good morning, Todd. Yeah, everyone should be waking up this morning outraged by that comment. This is not something that has just happened recently, and Florida's been warning about this since this administration took over. Mayorkas has come in like a virus and infected these what need to be healthy, strong, fundamental programs to ensure the stability and safety of Americans in times of disaster. So you heard, they have taken the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program and over time siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars into basically making it an illegal immigrant resettlement program. And so when you see these states and cities around the nation declaring emergencies, even blue states, because of what this administration has done, encouraging more and more and more, developing programs to encourage more and more and more people to come here, the government, Biden and Harris, are having to fund that on the backs of the American people. And now, right now, in Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, all of these states are hurting because of this truly natural disaster, not a Biden-Harris-made disaster. They're saying we need more money. And of course they need more money because they've been laundering it from the true intended purpose of this fund that Congress set forth. Laws be damned.
There's two things going on here. We just touched upon the main thing, this horrific prioritization of migrants over American taxpayers. But there's also something else here. What does this say about the Biden-Harris administration's ability to just lead? If they underfunded FEMA this much, and we are not even close to being in the heart of hurricane season, which in reality is August, September, October, and November, A.G. Moody.
Look, this is what President Trump did so well while in office. He could get to a 30,000-foot level, look at the...
All right, well, this is some of the extremism. We are in the heart of it. If you just said it's August, September, October, November, we're in October. So unless you're saying the heart of it is towards the end, but neither here nor there. I'm just addressing that. But there's just exaggeration on both sides. And we don't need to exaggerate. We don't need to exaggerate because you know what happens when you exaggerate? I just stopped the video. And it probably would have made the same point if you didn't exaggerate it. But when I hear that, it's kind of just like, you know, like we are in the heart of it, but we don't have to exaggerate. Yeah, we should have enough to go through November. It's October, still have another month and 2/3 of a month to go through. Why is that funding not available? Explain it to somebody, explain it to us common folks that are not so in tune with FEMA and so in tune with how this all works. Just break it down for us. That's all we're asking. Because if you break it down for us, maybe there's a certain level of understanding to where now we're not pinning Americans against migrants. It's not more of that issue that we always hear about. And maybe everybody will have more of an understanding about it.
Health of American agencies and programs, determine what the problems were, and enlist resources.
But what I will say, another reason why, let's say somebody like me, why I look at it, you know, what Biden and Harris are doing with kind of funny eyes, and FEMA, is because let's not act like this is the first situation. It just happened in Hawaii. It just happened with Hawaii. Now, I know my bro Urs, I know my sis Lana, the things that they've told me as far as the support that they've gotten, it's almost like you look at that support to Americans and then look at how long it maybe has taken them to even get that type of support or to have programs to where they can hopefully get support in the future. It's not comparable to how quick, let's say, a migrant may get support, whether you're coming in legally or illegally. It's not adding up. And it just puts a bad stain in people's mouth. And it makes you look at a certain situation where now they're creating a certain level of division between Americans and migrants. They're creating all this animosity towards migrants because they're looking at it like, damn, we're going through all this. We all see the amount of money, or we all hear people talking about the amount of money that migrants are getting. But then we just see certain situations in America that are underfunded to where Americans are not getting the support that they need, whether it's Hawaii or this recent hurricane. And it creates a certain level of animosity that, I mean, that's a pretty natural feeling. It's a pretty understandable feeling, I would imagine.
Talented individuals and a strategy to put Americans and the safety and strength of this nation first. I've seen it work here in Florida with Governor DeSantis. We decide where our problems are, we set forth to fix them, and we make sure not only money, but the strategy and talented personnel are in place to fix them. So, for example, when you have a disaster like this, and you know when there's no electricity, instability, when there's people needing just the basics of life because of a disaster. I was with officers the other night, and we surged our resources in vulnerable areas to looting. We made sure officers knew what to look for when it was in complete darkness. Right. They knew what to charge. We make sure our state attorneys know to hold these people so they don't get back out and start ravaging these communities again. It takes proactive efforts, and you just do not see this out of this administration. And here in the roosters of coming home to roost, look at what's happening right now.
The Florida model
when
really,
we're in the middle of a disaster with this administration at the helm.
You're right. The Florida model really does need to be a 50-state solution. Just want to mention this. You all launched an anti-looting team in response to Hurricane Helene, coming as 8 migrant workers are arrested in Tennessee, accused of stealing from flooded buildings. You guys do it right down there. I would just add, only a depraved person steals from someone in their time of need. All
right, so we're going to move on to the last video of Corinne Jean-Pierre. Interesting conversation between her and what's Peter's last name? Ducey? Am I pronouncing it correctly? The one that she's always going back and forth with. So we'll take a look at this conversation, then we'll wrap it up and get some rest. So let's hear it. Oh, shoot. Sorry about that.
Directly.
My bad. My apologies. Y'all know I be having these moments sometimes. I didn't share the screen. Let's take a look.
Let's head to the White House. Peter Ducey is asking questions of Corinne Jean-Pierre. Let's listen.
Home, who are wrongfully detained and held hostage. And again, frankly, we have had an extraordinary record of doing just that. And that's going to be the president's top priority.
Listen to his conversation. Listen to his question. It's very specific. And this is what I was trying to mention earlier about Congress, where for FEMA, because they ran out of money, now they're waiting for Congress to go back, approve them for more money. But listen to what he says.
And on this issue of funding, the administration has money to send to Lebanon without Congress coming back. but Congress does have to come back to approve money to send to people in North Carolina. Do I have that right?
So the administration has money without Congress having to, vote on it, whatever, to send money to Lebanon. They already have that. However, when it comes to hurricane aid for Americans, Congress has to get back together, vote for aid. That's what he asked. Now listen to her response.
Come back to approve money to send to people in North Carolina. Do I have that right?
Here's what I'm going to be very clear about. The president and the vice president has had a robust whole of government response to this. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I said it at the top, more than $200 million that we have directly put towards survivors here for disaster help. And that's because of this president's commitment to make sure that we are there for communities that are impacted. We take this very seriously again. We take this very seriously. And before the hurricane hit, we pre-positioned more than 1,500 federal folks on the ground to help. And so we have made sure that every state has gotten their storm requested emergency declaration. They requested it, and we made sure they received it. We've taken this very seriously. More than $200 million that we have provided to the impacted areas. But instead, people want to do disinformation, misinformation, which is dangerous, because then
I understand his face. I don't know. Look at his face when she says misinformation, disinformation. If it is misinformation or disinformation, then let's kind of go back to what the initial question was. It was very simple. He just was asking, like, hey, just want to get it straight that we have money to send to Lebanon without Congress meeting. However, when it comes to the aid, Congress has to meet when it comes to the aid for the hurricane victims. She said a whole bunch of stuff to where probably a lot of us forgot the initial question or initial statement that he was looking for confirmation from. Then she's going to say a whole bunch of other stuff and then talk about misinformation and disinformation. You could have just answered the question straightforward and direct if you're looking to call out misinformation and looking to make it to have your point come across a lot clearer and your stance on it.
do disinformation, misinformation, which is dangerous, because then when folks on the ground hear that, they may not want to ask for the help that they need. That is there for them. That's our focus here.
But President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value. If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is, your whole premise of the question is misinformation.
He made it very clear. He said, if Joe Biden says, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. This is what I said. The same energy's got to be kept across the board. I don't think, now I know Peter and Corinne, they have their back and forth a lot. You know, we've covered them a lot. But this is a very simple thing. And I think that most people in this particular situation, maybe people would disagree with Peter in other situations, most situations, I don't know. However, in this particular situation, when I'm observing this back and forth, it seems like she's beating around the bush. He's being direct. He's being the more rational person compared to her. Am I missing something? Y'all tell me.
There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is, your whole premise of the question is misinformation, sir.
So the premise of the question is misinformation. Is there anything else that's misinformation?
Yes, it's misinformation.
Is there money to send to Lebanon right now?
I just mentioned to you that we provided more than $200 million to folks.
Just because you provided more than 200, what does that mean? Most people just hear 200 million and we assume that's a lot of money. If they need more, they need more. And perhaps we would have more. And I think that's what Peter's saying. How do we have all this money to send out to other places if whether it's 200, whether you send over whether you had 2 billion for them? If it's not enough, then it's not enough. And I think it's a perfectly fair question to say, like, hey, whatever the amount is that you had or that you sent or you provided, if more is needed, then people are going to look into why that more that is needed is not available and accessible.
Who are impacted in the area. And I just shared with you that people are deciding not to, people are deciding not to,
wait. To Congress that there's not enough money to help people in North
Carolina. We're talking about the SBA disaster loan.
That's money for people in North Carolina.
And that's important, and people in North Carolina need that. Wait, this is nothing new. Peter, this is nothing new. Congress comes together, they provide money, millions of dollars, for
where is this money being provided? Like, what do they mean Congress provides it? Is it coming out of the Congress, like Congress people, congressmen, congresswomen? Is it coming out of their pockets, or like where's, like, break it down for me if you can.
For disaster relief. We're asking them to do the job that they have been doing for some time.
From a letter that President Biden sent to Johnson, McConnell, Schumer, and Jeffries. The president's letter is not misinformation. Would you agree?
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation. There is money that we are allocating to the impacted areas, and there's money there to help people who truly need it. There are survivors who need the funding, and it's there.
That you don't like misinformation.
I said that. I actually said we have the money available to help.
I agree. You can't call a question that you don't like misinformation. You can't just run around like that. That's like the new whole fake news thing. People used to get mad when Trump say fake news. I don't even want to get in. You can't just call a question that you don't like misinformation. And if you are going to call it misinformation, just be very clear about which parts of the question are in misinformation and why it's misleading.
I actually said we have the money available to help survivors of Hurricane Helene and also Hurricane Milton. Now there's going to be a shortfall, right? Because we don't know how bad Hurricane Milton is going to be. And so we're going to need additional funding. That's
exactly what I just asked about. And you said it was misinformation. Yes.
What you're asking me is why Congress needs to come back and do their job. That's what you're asking me. Congress needs to come back and do their job and provide extra assistance, extra funding to disaster relief fund. That's what Congress needs to do, and we're going to continue to urge that. You may not want that. But that's
so she's saying, I want to make sure that I am being fair. So she's saying that that's just the normal process. There's a certain amount that's allotted, and Congress has to come back and then provide additional. Now, if that's the case, I don't know why Mayorkas. Now, let's keep in mind, we gotta go back to that video. Why I don't understand why Alejandro Mayorkas, hold on, who is the United States Secretary of Homeland Security, if this is the normal way and this is just Congress doing their job, then I don't understand why Alejandro Mayorkas would even say the things that he mentioned. Like, why would he even say we're going to run out if the normal way of doing things is Congress to vote on it? I wouldn't say it's going to run out. Like, hey, this is our normal process. We have a certain amount that is assigned for this particular issue. But of course, when there's more that's needed, this is the normal process. We go through Congress. How he presented what he said did not come across like that. It just didn't. But that's where we are with it. I'm not sure that any of us I'm not sure if anybody came away after that conversation with any more of an understanding on what exactly is going on. But just presenting it to y'all, and hopefully, regardless of whether Congress has to provide it or however we figure it out, people get assistance. Because with all this climate change that people, it's funny how the same people on the side of climate change saying that all the harmful things that are going to come from climate change, including some of these weird hurricanes that we've been seeing that are moving inland. It's apparently that's kind of some of the conversations that I've had, that these are a little bit, we're seeing more up and down behavior of a lot of these storms. And we're seeing more of them, more extreme ones, at a high rate, all these different things. If climate change is causing all these things, then why not be prepared? Like, if you're on the climate change side and warning us on all these harmful effects that come from climate change, then why not be prepared for it? So that would be my only question, or I can't say my only question, but definitely one of them. But we're going to leave it here. As always, we're just going to take 30 seconds today. 30 seconds, meditate, visualize, Whatever you need to do, get your breath work, inhale some positive energy, exhale all the BS, whatever we need to do to put ourselves in the best mindset to have a good quality sleep. So that way we could wake up tomorrow and have an amazing day. So let's take that 30 seconds right now. And if you're in a safe place, close your eyes. So let's go. All right, one last breath. Inhaling all positive energy, exhaling all the negative. Y'all know what we're here to do. Elevate on purpose. Raising standards in order to become the leaders, the people that we need to become, and to play the roles that we need to play in order to elevate society in every area that we're focused on, right? Pick an area, focus on that, and let's continue to work together so that we can grow. Onward and upward, strength and honor. And as we always do every week, we're getting to that bag. That bag is what we're aligned with. All right, what we're aligned with. What's in my bag is in my bag. What's in your cup is in your cup. What's in your bag is in your bag. Shout out to, that's the whole Wayne thing. But yeah, what's in my bag, peace, love, happiness, health, wealth, and with everything that we do, integrity. And on that note, appreciate y'all, love y'all, and I'll see y'all soon. Continue to tap in, continue to support. We actually we'll have another show tomorrow. So we'll have our regularly scheduled show tomorrow. And it'll be more of just hopefully more enlightenment, more good conversations, and us just figuring out how we all can come together and create more peaceful resolutions in whatever area of our lives that we're discussing. So with that, I'll see y'all soon. Ew.